Let's jump into the first story, the tragic news.
That's it.
From the Daily Mail, have they no shame? Woke liberals writing for the New York Times, New York Magazine, and The Atlantic waste no time attacking the colonizer queen mere hours after her death, age 96, and hours after Twitter took down vile post mocking monarch. Now, I don't know if I don't know why that tweet got removed. We should probably look into it before I give my opinion, but I don't think you should be censored for having bad opinions. I'm glad we get to see these people being awful, because
right.
I don't want to, mistakenly work with, associate with people who would do something like this. So they write, the death of Queen Elizabeth has been celebrated by some opinion writers, with one promising to dance on her grave and another describing her 70-year reign as devastating. While millions around the world were mourning the death of the 96-year-old, provocateurs were, within hours of her death, mocking the outpouring of grief in some of the most esteemed publications in the United States. One Pennsylvania professor even said she hoped the Queen's final hours of pain would be excruciating. Yeah, I don't think that was the case. You're an awful person. Jeff Bezos was among those condemning her now deleted tweet. Good. I'm glad to see it. And it's nasty stuff, man. It's tough. I think what we're seeing here is that these people will say anything for woke points. And so they know they're going to be contrarian. They know shock content is going to get them attention. And here they are now getting it. So I won't get into, their names or whatever, but just point out, like, there are people in this world and in this country that are just evil, despicable. They revel in suffering and pain. There's a lot to say about the monarchy. We're starting to debate, the issues of monarchy, whether or not there is one after this. Because I know, what are they saying? King Charles, I know, he's assumed
King
the throne.
Charles III.
But is he really? I mean, he's already very old. But I don't know, what do you guys think about the woke stuff? Let's get into that first.
Yeah, well, it's not really surprising. I feel like every time a politician or a person dies that people on the left have deemed an oppressor, whether it's true direct oppression or not, they think that they are more virtuous by kind of celebrating that person's death. I don't think that they just think that it's not bad to do it. I think they actually think that it is moral and good, because to them, they see themselves as kind of, on the right side of history, and someone like Queen Elizabeth as a white colonizer and oppressor, and therefore, why wouldn't you celebrate her death in the same way that you would celebrate Hitler's death? Of course, I don't think that's comparable at all. I don't think that she can be compared to Hitler or any other true oppressor in any way, but it's not surprising. It's what they always do. It's what they did to John McCain. It's what they did to George Bush. It's what they did to Barbara Bush. I mean, it doesn't matter. That's what they're going to do.
I think the Queen is particularly vulnerable to this because Americans have no comparable figure to the monarchy.
Yeah.
Trump.
Well, that's complicated, but everyone in our office is tired of me saying this, but I'm British. I'm a British citizen and an American citizen, and it is the true divide between what I feel like is my upbringing in America and my British heritage, which is that the monarchy is an institution that represents not only political power but a cultural history that is so interwoven with things that are challenging for the British people as well as things that make them unique and prosperous. And I think Queen Elizabeth, in so many ways, partially because her tenure was so long, she reigned for 70 years. Yeah. There's really no one like her. And during her time, you have to remember all of the social, cultural, and technological change that swept through England. There's really no one like her. And I know, when did the reign of the British monarchy end? There's a lot of points in history where people will say, well, this was really effective end, this is really effective end. To me and to a lot of people that I know, this is the end of the British monarchy because she represents a tie to a history that is so far gone from the culture we have today.
You see, Harry, is it Harry that left with Meghan Markle? Is that Harry? He was basically done with monarchy. At some point it becomes a burden.
Well, she became in line for the throne when her uncle resigned. And he said, I don't want to be king. I'd rather marry this American. And at the time, he couldn't marry her and also be king. So he renounced his title. Her father became the king, and then she became the heir to the throne. I mean, monarchy has always been, to a certain degree, optional. You don't have to take over the role. I think, British culture, you see it a lot in the obituaries that are coming out right now for Queen Elizabeth, which is that she had a very strong sense of duty. And the idea of a sense of duty, at least in the way I was raised and the ties that I saw to my British heritage, was this is a big theme. The idea that you rise to your purpose and you rise to duty and you serve, and I think in a lot of ways, though there are things wrong with the monarchy, and I think it's important to be able to criticize your government, Queen Elizabeth really represented that to people. And even though there are people who don't support the monarchy, they don't love it, they will still mourn this loss because it is the end to an era of British history and British culture.
Yeah, the British Empire. Technically, she was the empress until about this says 97 when what is it? Hong Kong was ceded over to China again. That was when the British Empire ended. So that's when she no longer was the empress. Of course, you can be a king and an emperor at the same time. The king of England, the Empire of Britain.
And she's still the effective head of government in Canada. I mean, she doesn't really do anything. She was still the effective head of government, I think, in Australia. Again, those countries operate independently, but she has such a serious cultural influence that I really think, there are lots of wonderful things about America, but that aspect we don't have. And we chose not to. We separated from England for a reason. And I think those things are good. But it's really difficult for Americans to understand because we view our political leaders with a level of vitriol. Yeah. And we know they are temporary. We know if we fight hard enough, we can push them out. And that's just not how this works.
She was a unifying figure. Even for people on the left and the right in Britain, it seemed like a lot of people unified them. Yeah. Or unified around her.
Yeah. And I think part of it is, yesterday, she met with Liz Truss, who's the new prime minister. Right. She, to the end, was conducting business and is such an integral part of culture and the administrative state of Britain. We really just don't have anything like that.
Do you think that because the royal family, what was that?
Sorry, nothing.
Do you think that because they know they're in for life, they try to do a better job of being unifying as opposed to the politicians here know they're going to be hated, so they're like, I'm out, screw you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of their nature, that they're not supposed to be political. She really didn't comment on politics, and really none of them do, except for Meghan Markle, because she's not interested in that royal title of being a unifier at all.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
No.
Of Markle?
Of Markle or royalty?
Markle.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, I mean, royalty has its problems.
Yeah.
But, I can, look, I'm not British. I'm not from the United Kingdom. So if people there really love her, I'm kind of like, I don't know, do your thing. We don't have a queen. We got rid of that. So
royalty,
that's all you.
I think it's horrific. It's if you're born into a family, you get to run the country. Makes no sense. It's the opposite of meritocracy. It has no basis in a functional reality or a system of merit, of human merit. But that being said, the first thing I thought when the queen died was I was thought of her family and how they're emotional, how they're handling it right now. Then the second thing was, well, when you asked me everyone looked at me when I walked in and was like, so what do you think about the queen?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'd rather that the monarchy ended and that she lived than that she died and there's still a monarchy. I have no problems with her. She actually seemed like a pretty cool person from a distance, from the Western media that I was getting my whole life. Seemed like one of the best, monarchs in human history. Personally, she was very open.
She's well loved. And remember, she served with 15 prime ministers and 14 American presidents. Yeah. So, and as far as I know, no one doesn't like her.
Think about everything that you've seen as a 96-year-old. Think about everything you can remember.
When she was coronated, the first prime minister she worked with was Winston Churchill.
Which is
just
insane.
like to put that in perspective. Who was born in like 1847, maybe? Like I can't even get the dates
she was
right.
like old when I was born. I was thinking about that earlier.
There are British people, there are generations of British people where she has always been the queen. Like she's not just on your money, she is always around.
Well, and I think because the world is so chaotic and because things in the world, and especially in the UK, have changed so much, her steady presence has really kind of helped keep people sane. Yeah. And now that she's gone, what's going to happen? We don't know.
King Charles, what's the king going to do? The king. What's a king going to do?
Are they going to put him on all the money now? They got it.
He gets some money and some stamps.
Are there like other kings on their money too? Or is it all Queen Elizabeth?
Prime Minister?
If I'm remembering correctly, different, just like we do, like with coins and the dollar and whatever else, like we have different presidents on our currency. She's on some money and she's on the stamp, but not all.
Isn't she on like Canadian money too? And
like because she is the head of. I mean, those were part of the British Empire, so she is still the. To this day.
That's what Ian was saying. She's
the empress, and now the emperor is now reigning supreme. Emperor Charles is back. Well, technically, the British Empire is kind of amorphous. They never really said when it ended. Everyone's just kind of like, it just kind of ended when Hong Kong was in '97. They thought maybe the loss of the Suez Canal was really when the British Empire no longer had power. Maybe it just exists, du jour, but not de facto.
Just like she is the figurative head of government of Canada or of like the British Virgin Islands, right? Like those places all have their own governments and elect their own officials and have their own form of government. It's kind of in name only that they're still tied to the empire. The empire is not functional as it once was.
I wonder how long the monarchy will last at this point now, because the way Harry was just like, no, man, I'm done.
What I think is that it'll end up going bankrupt. I think that the monarchy will always be sort of part of it, because you also have to remember, we think of it as like, oh, it's the queen and the prince and she's got those grandkids, but like actually there are still dukes and duchesses and people like there are all kinds of titles in British culture
So
that
what would
we
that
don't
look
have.
like? Like, what would the dissolution of the monarchy actually look like? If it went bankrupt, what would happen?
Well, my thought is it's very hard to remove the monarchy entirely because they would have to undo how they conduct some governmental business, right?
Yeah.
And so to a certain extent, there will be enough people who don't, like, it's like, it's King Charles now, then it's William, and then it's George. So that gives us, like, what, at least 100 years, probably more.
Yeah.
I think part of it is that they will become less influential, and it becomes unlikely. Like, I wonder if they'll have to hold some other kind of office. Their government will evolve. Well, it's not just enough to be granted this power. You have to have something else.
I think Charles has got to bring it back to their roots. Start issuing letters of marque, sending out
let's
naval
go.
destroyers
There
and
you
like
go.
private vessels to raid cargo ships. And just all
I think that'd be fascinating if you.
Bring back colonization.
There we go.
Start
But
sending
where would he
ships.
colonize? That's the
Well,
thing.
China's colonizing.
Mars.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about 21st century
Well,
colonization.
Like, would you be psyched about the monarchy if tomorrow King Charles is like, I'm sending something to the
No,
moon?
hell no. It's got to be done in a decentralized, earthen way where we're all in it together. Because if we start, what's going to happen is
don't think that's
corporations.
gonna happen.
It's going to be corporations starting to colonize it.
Yeah,
and that's going to be
already
like
true.
Yeah.
talk about a monarchy, the owner of the corporation.
While they're actively criticizing colonization and they're like these people, China's actively colonizing.
They're literally calling.
Yeah.
It is literal colonization.
Yeah.
And they don't-
Africa, South America. Yep.
and even Australia and America and Europe.
Yeah.
It's because their idea of colonization is like they think white people are evil.
Yeah.
So they assume a bunch of white people get on a boat and they all have like devil horns and pitchforks, like, we're gonna go
just
kill
kill
other
brown
people.
people. Yeah.
When in reality it was like people saying, there's not a lot of land here anymore. I'm gonna get on the boat and go find a better place to live.
They don't
Yeah.
like
And
my
they showed up.
religion. Yeah.
So what's happening now with colonization in China is that it's just regular Chinese citizens being like, I'm gonna move to the United States and go live in New York.
I'm going to move to Vancouver.
And then what happens is large swaths of these populations move into these areas. They create, little cultural centers, little Chinatowns and things like that. And that is literal colonization.
Well, it's a lot more nefarious than that in places like Africa and South America.
sure.
The Chinese government is going in there and saying, oh, you want a railway? Great. You get to, pay us this amount of money. Ethiopia can't pay them back for it. Oh, you're in debt to us. Now we own you. So it's not as much like creating Chinatown as, hey, we're going to literally take over your country by putting you in debt.
But I just wanted to differentiate between the evil vision of colonization that these woke leftists think versus when you just have a large population moving around and moving into places. But
Yeah.
you're right. They also have the Belt and Road Initiative. They're doing a bunch of these deals, like you mentioned. They are actively doing oil exploration in Africa and South America. They wanted to dig a Nicaraguan canal to compete with Panama. They are expanding rapidly. Not to mention the South China Sea. So you want to talk about modern colonization? Maybe we can get some of our friends over on the woke left to criticize it, but somehow I just don't think they're going to do it.
They usually criticize the Israeli colonization of the West Bank. When you talk about colonizing, it could be barren land. People go and create a colony there of people. That's a form of it. But then there's also where you go and seize someone's property and then you set up your house there, which is also a form of colonization, but they're completely different, really, ethically. One of them, you're not displacing humans. The other one is you're seizing people's land. So in Israel, for instance, there's a lot, and I get a lot of the media through the Western media, so it's hard to parse what's happening. But I've seen videos of people getting off of buses, like Israelis or Americans that have been invited there to colonize the West Bank, and they get off the bus with like mattresses in their arms and just run, and they're all racing to get to the house first, where the Palestinian guy's not home, and then they take it. They go in and they're like, "This is my home now. If you mess with me, the police will shoot you." So we took it.
Yeah, I'd want to dig into that. I think people have talked about that, and there's something about that I don't fully understand.
That's intentional.
And I don't think
it.
Just jumping from China to Israel. It's
the two biggest colonizers on earth right now are the Israelis and the Chinese.
That is 100% not
well,
true.
who's the other second
Bro,
one?
Israel is so small. How many people live in Israel?
Yeah, but
Wow.
There's a billion and a half
you say
people
that
in
they're
China.
talk per capita.
In
They're
every
colonizing the
continent.
West Bank. What else are they colonizing? And
Gaza, the West Bank.
Come on,
But
man.
I'm talking per capita.
We're talking
Like
about
what percentage of the population are colonizing right now? Israel's
you're
relatively
wrong,
low.
bro.
I mean, it's colonizing. It's been colonizing since 1963.
Sure.
I mean, I just don't know. I wouldn't be,
No, but
arguing
it's just
with
like,
you just for arguing.
we're talking about one of the most populous nations on the planet with 1.5 billion people. having their citizens either freely move or military expansion onto every continent on the planet, even Antarctica to a certain degree. It's just like there's no reason to bring up Israel in that context.
8 million people.
The two largest.
Yeah, come on. No, bro, you can't compare 1.3 billion to 8 million.
Yeah, but you got to go per capita. I'm not talking about
per capita.
Per capita, it's very much. You have much less probably in China because there's so many people and so few relative colonizers.
I don't know. What's this obsession with Israel? You're talking about like a
I'm
nation.
not obsessed with Israel.
I'm talking about right now. You're like hell bent on.
I mean, are you denying that they're colonizing the West Bank?
But what does that have to do with global expansion?
Is that colonizing? Wouldn't they say that was their land in the first place? That they were the first people there? Because they were historically. I don't even know. I don't know your argument. I haven't seen the video. I don't know the evidence of what you're talking about. I would just be curious because I haven't really heard about it.
The argument of why? It starts with, I think, at the
end
of...
Or just if it's actually happening. Like, where else are they colonizing? You look at China. They're all over the world colonizing. Like, where's Israel going?
Right. A lot of people, I think, consider it ethical colonization because it's internal. But, you know...
The population of New York City is like, what, 9 million people? So it'd be like, are you comparing it to like if the population of New York spread out across the country? Is that colonizing?
You know, like if a bunch of New Yorkers started going from Manhattan to Jersey City, they
all went to Florida
and they were like
COVID.
fighting and there were like riots and stuff. I'd be like, it's bad. But I just don't know how you compare the size of population to what China is doing. I mean, it's not like Israel is sinking, Vietnamese shipping vessels, firing missiles over neighboring islands into territorial waters of other countries.
Whoa. Hamas and Israel have been firing missiles into each other's territory for decades.
You're talking about a small regional conflict of great consequence.
Yeah, it is a great consequence.
Compared to China expanding in the South China Sea.
No, I'm not comparing that.
Okay, so we're talking...
I guess there's a comparison in that they're both colonizing. Maybe different.
You're just saying like they're the first and the second.
Yeah. The two largest colonization programs on Earth right now are in Gaza, West Bank, and the Chinese.
I'm pretty sure
Africa,
that's just not true. And that's a weird thing to say.
I wouldn't call what's happening in Israel colonization.
Like I would say
I feel
Russia.
Like it is
Russia is probably the second biggest colonizer.
In what aspect? They're invading right now. There's a military invasion.
Yes, and then also just the expansion of there's more Russian troops and people spreading out than Israeli.
Do you have that number somewhere?
Bro, Russia took Crimea and now they're
That's an invasion though. It's different. A colonization is like not military. I mean, I guess there's fight. There could be fighting.
Okay,
involved,
bro.
But
I don't get the point you're trying to make.
I think California is colonizing Texas and Arizona and Colorado.
I think New Yorkers are colonizing Florida.
Yeah,
they left during COVID and they're like, we like it here. We're going to stay and bring everyone up. I mean, it's a hard comparison to make. I understand what you're saying, that there is conflict there and it feels like one force has more power than the other, but I wouldn't classify what's going on in Israel as colonization more than regional conflict.
Israel was a British and French colony at the end of World War I. They promised the Allied forces, the British, French, and Italians promised that area to the Arabs if the Arabs would betray the Ottomans. So the Arabs were like, oh, you're going to give us this area that's now Israel. You're going to give this to the Arabs? We'll betray the Ottomans. They betrayed the Ottomans. The French and English won the war. And then they said, you know what, Arabs? We're going to renege on our offer. We're going to keep the land for ourselves. And then they created the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and that basically set up Israel as we know it, but it was very small. And then over the next 30 or 40 years, I think there was like a military buildup, and then all of a sudden in the 50s, I think, they had this 7-day war. Was it 1957, 1963, all around that time, and just conquered a lot of land around it, whether you want to consider that colonization or not.
Here's the question. Is all colonization wrong, do you think?
It's a good question. You asked that before the show too.
Yeah.
I don't either.
There's this romanticizing on the left about like Native Americans, for instance. They want to believe this narrative of the evil white man from Europe coming and just massacring all the natives. It's like, oh, but don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of really bad history there, of course.
Yeah.
Lands get conquered, war breaks out, and some people win out over others. But it's like, I don't know, man. The Aztecs were kind of brutal, They were warring with each other. They were sacrificing people, ripping out their hearts and stuff like that. So it's hard to say, but based on our standards as Americans with the Constitution, the answer is yes, if you think our standards are better than other countries' standards. So, Hong Kong, for instance, I think you were mentioning this before the show. They had it seems to be getting really bad for them now with China moving in because we don't think China's values are good values. They're authoritarian. Yeah. They let's just say the people who are living there are not doing so well. You got the Uyghur concentration camps. So would Hong Kong be better off with, Western colonization? I think the people there thought so.
Hong Kongers, yeah, I think they would have thought so. I mean, they're the ones that are being thrown in jail for being dissidents. And so I would say that, they try to champion free speech, which are Western values. Those are not universal values. So, but I don't know that the ends necessarily justify the means in all of these cases. But was Hong Kong better off as a British colony? 100%.
Yeah, imagine what the United States would look like if no one ever came here. I mean, what would it be? I can't imagine that it would be substantially well developed.
Well, I think leftists have this fantasy. I've noticed this. They've got this like romantic fantasy in their head that before civilization, things were better. That if we all went back to living in tribes and just like living off the earth, and that we would be better off than we were, than we are now with civilization. It
is objectively better to stub your toe and then die from the infection, right?
Yes, that's true. Antibiotics are bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Western medicine for the win.
Tribal life was pretty brutal. There was tribal chieftains ruled by force.
Think that.
I think we're insulated from brutality in a certain extent because of the way we live now, because of modern conveniences. I also think that, and I'm grateful for that. I don't want to say that I would prefer to live in a more brutal time. But I also think that we are used to a certain level of stability that was just not true for most of global history. I mean, all of the borders of countries that we see now, even if you don't like that they were part of colonization, they exist because we went through a period of exploration and discovery. I mean, no one today is going to get on a boat and be like, I'm going to find some land and see what happens there. Like, we can't do that because we know what's out there. You'd be nice, but
you
it's
just
not
go
going to
find
happen.
like an uninhabited island in the middle of nowhere and be like, I'm going to build this up, make something out of it.
I'm going to turn it into something. We can't do that because it belongs to everyone now because we've explored the world. Like that time period is difficult for us to relate to, which I think helps feed this narrative that colonization was bad because we don't really know what life was like while that was going on.
Here's a funny thing. There's a story I've told before about this woke guy I was talking to in North Dakota, and it was at the Dakota Access Pipeline protest. I said, I have to leave by tomorrow because I have a meeting in Los Angeles and I got to drive from North Dakota to LA, which is crazy. Not a meeting tomorrow, but in a few days, so I got to leave tomorrow. And then he was like, nah, man, you shouldn't do that. Meeting schedule, that's colonial thinking. And then I was like, what does that mean? He's like, it's colonial thinking, man. Like having a meeting and a schedule. The Native Americans don't have that. They like wake up when they need to and they get to work and they get it done. And then I was like, having a meeting is colonial thinking? Like, what are you saying? Like, what does that mean? Like, that I'm tracking time? He's like, yeah, like the colonizers from Europe came and they brought these schedules in time, these meetings. And then I was like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, Asians have schedules too. They're not white people.
Yeah.
In their minds, they think colonization is all modern success. And all modern success is bad.
It's oppressive.
And I'm just like, you're a white supremacist with a guilty conscience.
Yes, they attach everything that they don't like to colonialism and white supremacy, like the gender binary. There was this like New York Times article the other day saying maternal instinct is a myth that was created by like Western men in order to oppress women. And I always go back to like, whether you believe the Bible is the inspired word of God or not, it is still a book that was written at least 6,000 years ago by Eastern brown men. And like literally one of the very first verses of the Bible says that God made them male and female. So the gender binary is neither Western nor modern. And so it's so funny when people think that we can just like, we can't see back in history.
Also, isn't this like a bigoted point of view to take? Be like, Native American people couldn't schedule or figure out time. Like that seems like a horrible stance to be like, only white people know how to like make appointments. What are you talking about?
Like the museum.
That's what they said.
The African American History Museum. Remember a couple years ago they put out that page on their website that was like being on time, and having lists and having schedules. That's
delayed
all
gratification.
I
had to tell this guy, I was like, dude, Asians invented the compass 1,000 years before your ancestors did. So don't come to me and talk about how the white man created everything because you're a white supremacist. You genuinely think white people did everything good, bro. Get out of here with that stuff. But that's their attitudes. They're on the left. And they're the good people because they recognize that they are the superior race, but they should be nicer to poor people. It's like, get out of here, dude.
I think that's creepy. Such a horrible stance today. Like,
that's their stance. I'm like, this idea that so when I asked about this, when I said Asians have schedules, bro, he goes, yeah, but that came from colonization. And I was like, what? And he's like the white colonists came to China and East Asia and brought that with them. And that's when I was like, dude, they invented the compass 1,000 years before Europeans did. And gunpowder. Like, pretty sure they were doing their thing before you got there. That's crazy that he thinks he's the not racist.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Algebra's Arab.
Yes.
Arabic.
Yes.
It means
Persian.
the Jabra.
Yeah.
It actually
There you
means
go.
the reunion of broken parts or bone
What?
setting.
Very poetic.
Wow, that
Bone
makes
setting?
sense.
Yeah,
That
in
makes
Arabic.
sense. It's cool.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.